Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. Now, I want to talk to you about the Ali Act, okay? Or to give it its full title, the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act of 2000. It was enacted by US Congress in 2000, May the 26th, I think it was. And it had three main objectives, okay? In case you don't know what they are, I'm going to go through them, but you may have heard of this thing called the Ali Act. Essentially, it was to protect fighters in US jurisdictions and to give them more rights and to stop them from being exploited. But there were three main prongs to the fork, if you like. Number one, it was to protect the rights and welfare of professional boxers on an interstate basis by preventing certain exploitative, oppressive, and unethical business practices. Okay. Number two, to assist state boxing commissions in their efforts to provide more effective public oversight of the sport. Number three, to promote honourable competition in professional boxing and enhance the overall integrity of the industry. Now, you may think, well, that sounds very fancy, but certainly the third point, promote honourable competition in professional boxing, enhance the overall integrity of the industry. We can all say we want that, but how's it going to be done? Basically, this act was there to stop a conflict of interest. And the best conflict of interest, is just to give you an example, in my lifetime, was when Don King was very prevalent in the 1980s and 1990s. He was obviously a hugely successful promoter, vast cards, multi-million dollar cards. And a lot of the fighters on those cards, who managed them? His son, Carl King, okay? So the idea that you've got a father and son negotiating a pay some sort of, a purse for a fighter, there's obviously a conflict of interest there. And it's not a surprise. It shouldn't have surprised anyone that fighters were vastly underpaid, were ripped off, hence the reason that, Don King has that reputation, all right? So that's a good example of what we needed, of why the Ali Act was needed, to stop exploitation of fighters. How we were going to increase honourable competition, enhance the integrity of boxing. Yes, that would probably come from the first 2 points I made. Assisting state boxing with its efforts to improve conditions, and also to look after the welfare of boxers and ensure they're not exploited. Okay, that's the basics of the Ali Act. Now, the criticisms of it were that no other sport has any kind of federal law protecting it. So people were saying, well, why should boxing have preferential treatment? Other sports don't have that. Of course, that doesn't allow for the fact that other sports aren't as fragmented as our sport, because we have, in terms of ruling bodies, we have 4 major ones and many others. But also the idea that from state to state, you can be refused a license in one state because of a brain scan, for example. You can go over to another state and they can completely ignore the brain scan because they are more interested in a person's individual right to do what they want to do, that sort of libertarian mentality. And you can say, yeah, but the guy might get in the ring and be killed. Well, that's up to him. So different states have different regulations, a different ethos regarding fighters. And the Ali Act was meant to kind of sew it all together. But the criticism was that there was still a strong element of each state doing individual, running it in their own individual way. Okay. Generally speaking, though, the Ali Act, the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act of 2000, has been a very positive thing for fighters, because at the risk of sounding repetitive, it stopped a lot of them from being exploited. But of course, exploitation still goes on, manipulation goes on. None of us are naive enough to believe that things will ever be perfect or close to it, but it made things better. Right. Now, along comes a bill named the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. So it sounds like the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act, but oh no, this is very, very different. Very different. Okay, and this is the brainchild or the brain fart of several people. This has been proposed by two U.S. Congress. It's been proposed to U.S. Congress by representatives Brian Jack, I think his name is. I don't know who this is, and Sharice Davids. And this seeks to alter federal regulations around the sport, right? And it is backed by TKO, the UFC ownership group. And they're looking to cross over into boxing. The UFC president is Dana White, and he is co-promoting September's Canelo Crawford fight, as we know, but he also has this league going, or this proposed league. And who is by his side? Probably like a silent partner, we might say, when it comes to this Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, but someone who would certainly support it is Turki Alalshikh. And I've always said, Turki Alalshikh is a very shady character. Any concentration of power, highly concentrated power in a very small place, is a dangerous thing. Certainly undemocratic. It's anything but democratic. But Alalshikh and Dana White want this league, and they want to circumvent the Ali Act. In fact, they've gone as far as to propose that this new reform will supersede the Ali Act. Okay. Now, Dana White is friends with Trump. I mean, they're cut from the same cloth. Their business practices are essentially the same. Anything goes. We'll do what we want when we want. Are we exploiting people? Don't know. Who cares? We're here to make money. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Okay. And some people will support that. I mean, 80 million people voted for Trump. So I assume that quite a few Americans will support that type of business model. Anything goes, no regulation. It's under the guise of some sort of form of libertarianism, if you like. But it's a realistic proposition, even though this hasn't been enacted yet, and it's quite a way off. Ultimately, you have to ask, why do Dana White, why does TKO, why does Alalshikh want the Ali Act overturned? And that is because they want to have carte blanche to do exactly what they want to do, to pay fighters as little as they possibly can, to sign fighters up for long-term contracts, to limit the amount of money that they pay per round. It's been proposed, in fact, that the basis of the league, fighters will get a minimum, almost like minimum wage, of $150 a round. Now, some may get more, of course, and there'll be, bonuses available and all sorts of stuff like that. But we're talking really chump change for fighters who are on their way up, unknown, young, perhaps haven't got someone to advise them, looking for a gig in which they can sort of get their foot in the door, so to speak. And basically, it's young, raw meat that is going to be, they're there to be taken and moulded, but ultimately they will be told, you will fight so and so, you will fight on this date, you're fighting this person. They have no say in it. You get signed to a contract, and then you are essentially signing away your rights. This, in many people's opinion, mine included, is exploitation, but desperate measures. It's like when people say, well, you can, if you don't like a job that's because you're treated appallingly and you're paid a pittance, you can always leave the job. Yeah, you got a choice. You can starve in the street, or you can just try and take another job, to try and desperately to find another job in a different field, perhaps. But ultimately, sometimes the choice is between wage slavery and destitution. And obviously people, as awful as it is, will pick wage slavery. All right. So, for example, let's say you got a 6-round fighter on $150 a round. That would be what, $900. They'll get $900 for that fight. In this country, a 6-round fighter might get 1,500 quid, that is. So that would be $2,000 roughly. But we're talking about controlling the money, right? And also there would be no conflict of interest between promoters, managers and everything, so on and so forth. Now, let's look at, because of what they essentially want, what TKO and Dana White want, is a UFC model in boxing, all right? And they, of course, are renowned for paying their leading fighters, the top people, not the undercard people, a pittance in comparison to say leading boxers. Leading boxers will make astronomical amounts of money, the top few at the top. And then as you go down, they'll still be making pretty good money if they're world class, decent enough money. And then you get to grassroots level, and it's like I say, a journeyman might get. Let's say a British journeyman fights twice a month. They might get $3,000 in total for a month, which is not bad because most of them have got other jobs. But if you look at the UFC model, it was only I think it was October of last year, where it was faced with an antitrust lawsuit, and this lawsuit claimed that UFC suppressed fighters' ability to negotiate. It was essentially a monopoly. Okay. And in October of last year, I'm sure it was last year, but I'm not absolutely certain it was 2024, but I think it was. In October, I know it's not October anyway, the UFC agreed to pay a total of $380 million to a group of former fighters who'd competed under the UFC banner between 2010 and 2017. And there were approximately 1,100 that were deemed affected, and 97% of those 1,100 fighters applied to receive funds. And the fighters in question received compensation payments between $100,000 and $1 million. Those figures are according to the firm that handled the lawsuit. Okay, so again, I repeat, the UFC basically got sued and paid up $380 million to these fighters, okay, because it had been vastly underpaying them and restricting their ability to negotiate their pay and so on and so forth. And this is almost an open secret that UFC pays chump change to it, even its leading lights. In 2010, for example, the UFC took home 80% of its overall earnings. So the fighters got 20%, and the UFC model, which would be White and all these little bum chums, they took home 80% of the earnings. In fact, fighters had less than 20% because there were overheads and various other, parties that had to be paid. It wasn't just the fighters, behind the scenes people and so on. I mean, you compare that to basketball, the NBA, players receive about 50% of the gross earnings. Okay. So what do we make of this? Well, I think it was inevitable that in order for White to enter boxing, he would in order for the league idea of Alalshikhs and Whites to work, they would have to either circumvent the Ali Act or try to essentially overturn it and replace it with something else. And because White is friends with Trump, and Trump is, he's very much the billionaire's friend, shall we say. His policies are very much geared towards sort of having, how can we phrase it? His policies are designed to reduce the amount of restriction on the actions and the business models of his billionaire funders. So is that diplomatic enough? Did I manage to pull out a sort of diplomatic enough phrasing for you there? Because of that, of course, Dana White will be whispering in his ear, and how you doing, Donald? You okay? Yeah, great. You know, you need any more? You need any more funding? You need a bit of this? Yeah, it's all very sort of chummy, but we'll see if it works, because this new act has yet to be. I don't think it's yet to be presented. I think it's been drafted. It was introduced to the U.S. Congress by this guy Brian Jack and also Sharice Davids, but nothing has been finalised yet. Eddie Hearn was asked about it in a recent interview. I can't remember who the interview was with, but he said he disapproves. He says that it's a bad look for boxing, that people are coming in and trying to take away the rights of fighters, undermine fighters' ability to be essentially independent bodies with their own ability to negotiate. Basically, the management, if a boxer has a manager, the manager will negotiate with the promoter. Under the Ali Act, those two must be separate entities. Under this new act, they can be one and the same, essentially. Okay, and Hearn was saying it's a bad look for boxing. It looks like we, the promoters, are trying to fleece the fighters for as much as we can get, which, of course, Dana White has always done in UFC, and which Alalshikh and Dana White are now trying to do with this new act. And Hearn said, no, it's not good. It's not good. The fighter should be respected, is how he phrased it. Look, I'm not a massive fan of Eddie Hearn. I think he's probably, leagues ahead of someone like Dana White, but then very few people aren't. So I agree with Hearn on this particular point. Whether anything will come of this, I don't know. We knew Dana White was a vulture capitalist slag. There's no doubt about it. We've known that for years and years, which again is why he's very friendly with Trump. But the one that you should note regarding this whole business is Turki Alalshikh. Anyone who goes around being called your excellency, anyone who is essentially comes from a non-democratic background, who is used to having his own way, who has that sense of absolute entitlement, who assumes that because he has access to untold tens or hundreds of millions, everything is down to who has the purse strings. That's all that matters. Anyone like that, especially with his rather shady background, and I've done a couple of videos on that, go and have a look at them if you want, but we should be very, very cautious of them, very cautious of them. Unless you want the Wild West, where fighters are just exploited and they're just chunks of meat and you throw them in, and, of course they've got the right to say no, and, all this sort of fake libertarianism. If you believe that, then yeah, you'll probably love this new act. I don't. I think it smacks of complete exploitation. It smacks of, again, we live in this modern world where billionaires should be allowed to do anything. Quite the contrary, in my opinion. But if you're that type of person, get on with it. Maybe you don't give a fuck about fighters' welfare. Maybe you just want to see good fights. I don't know. But let me know what you think about this new act that is coming in. The Muhammad Ali, what a cheek, taking Muhammad Ali's name and slapping it on something this revolting. Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, which is the new one, seeking to, shall we say, usurp the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act of 2000. A flawed but very necessary piece of legislation, in my opinion. You've got your opinion, leave it below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've got anything to add. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. It's been a long one, this video, but thank you. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, do all that good stuff, and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. Hit those likes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Bye for now.